Hello, and welcome to How Not to Retire, a psychological approach to a healthy and wealthy retirement. This is episode 50, Victoria Falls. Greetings, I'm your host, Dr. Richard Himmer. In this podcast, we rethink what it means to live a meaningful life, especially after the 9 to 5 is behind you, or maybe not quite behind you just yet. Today's episode is for those of you looking to travel during your encore years. My wife and I love cruises. Give me a balcony, a buffet, a historic destination, and a sea breeze. I'm doing pretty good. But there's one thing about cruising that drives me absolutely nuts. And if you've ever been on a ship, you've probably seen it too. That is the aimless wanderers. They stroll down the middle of the hallway like it's their personal runway. Suddenly, they stop to stare at a wall map. Then they spin around and head the other way. No signal, no warning. If you're late for a show, well, that's just too bad. You're trapped behind human speed bumps with frumpy attitudes. And it's not just the hallways. No. It's the track, too. On bigger ships, if you've been on the track, you've got 3 lanes. Walk, jog, and run. That sounds like it's great, and there's a lot of room there, right? Well, that's until the women's walking club shows up. Every cruise has one, and there's always 3 women. It's not 2, and it's never 4. They spread out across all 3 lanes, walking at conversation speed, and somehow they look offended or they are offended if you even think about jogging past them. It's like they've declared the track their personal fiefdom. Now, on a ship, that's just kind of funny, right? It's maybe mildly infuriating, but in retirement, being aimless or blocking the track, that can be a real problem. You see, a cruise is way more fun when you've got a plan. You know what time the show starts, when your snorkeling excursion leaves, and when you're hitting the dessert bar twice, or in my case, 3 times. Having a plan gives you direction, and I'll give you an example. One day at sea, my friend Jeff and I, we set a goal of 20,000 steps. On a sea day, that's a serious achievement. That night's entertainment was Mamma Mia. So just as we grabbed our seats, I noticed I was a little short on steps. Now, maybe I could have just said, that's close enough, but for some reason, that didn't fly. I remembered the open ice cream cone station, which is, there's no end to how much you can get. That was on deck 15. I'm on deck 3. So just before the show started, I ran up all 12 flights of stairs, grabbed an ice cream cone, and slowly walked back down. Problem solved, at least for now. When it got to intermission, I did it again. I don't know if I did it because I wanted more steps or because I wanted another cone. No aimless traffic in the stairwells, just me and my mission. And after the show, well, I got one more cone. By the end of the night, I had 20,000 steps and 3 ice cream cones. And that's what I call a purpose. And that's the point. I had a goal. I moved with intention. I got the reward. Retirement works the same way. Without a purpose, the days just blur. You stay busy most of the time, but you're not heading anywhere. And here's the kicker, and science backs this up. A large-scale study found, this is in 2013, by Kim, Sun, Park, and Peterson. They found that older adults with a strong sense of purpose live longer. Another similar study says it keeps you healthier and more resilient. And a third, it links the lack of purpose to depression, memory loss, even heart trouble, which all compromise life expectancy. So this isn't just about having a fun retirement. It's about protecting your health. Purpose is your compass. On a cruise, that might mean like signing up for trivia or dancing or running the stairs for an ice cream cone because you got a step goal. In retirement, it's volunteering, starting at the hobby you've been putting off, mentoring someone, or traveling with intention. The bottom line, if you don't know where you're going, you risk spending your golden years or your encore years like those walking clubs on the track, taking up the entire breadth of the space, blocking traffic, and probably missing the best parts of the journey. And trust me, nobody wants to be that person. When my wife and I travel, we prefer to do so with a purpose. We're not just ticking places off a list, although that is fun. We want to connect with the history, the people, and the land itself. That's precisely what guided our recent trip to Zambia and Zimbabwe, where we set out to see the legendary Victoria Falls. And along the way, we found white rhinos, school children, village life, and even elephants strolling through downtown Livingstone. But before I get to these stories, let me give you the backdrop. Today, Zambia is a peaceful and welcoming country, and it has been home for centuries to many Bantu-speaking peoples, the Tonga, Bemba, Lozi, and others, who built rich communities along the rivers and plains. In the late 1800s, this land came under British control and eventually became the colony of Northern Rhodesia. But in 1964, that changed because Zambia gained its independence with Kenneth Kaunda as its first president. In fact, and this was interesting to us, his statue stands tall in front of their new international airport. So when we got there, and after passing through customs, we were picked up by Crispin. He was the head of the lodge part of our excursion there. And we asked about the statue. He shared the story of Zambia's independence and the fight to secure its freedom. And right at the country's southern border lies one of the most jaw-dropping sights in the world, which was our primary goal, Victoria Falls. Now, to the local people, it's known as, to the local people who are called the Kolola, they call it Mosi Oa Tunya, or the smoke that thunders. Now, if you've ever seen Victoria Falls, whether from ground level or from the sky, the name makes perfect sense. When you see those clouds of spray rising hundreds of feet into the air and hear the roar of the water, thunder's exactly what comes to mind. The first European to lay eyes on the falls was a Scottish missionary by the name of Dr. David Livingstone, back on November 16th, 1855. Now, you will see this date everywhere. He had been traveling through southern Africa, mapping the rivers and meeting local communities. One of his primary goals was his search for the headwaters of the river Nile. And when he came upon this massive sheet of water plunging into the gorge, he named it after Queen Victoria. But he never forgot the power of the original name. His story, Dr. Livingstone's story, is quite remarkable, but in some ways it's a bit tragic. Born in Scotland, 1813, he trained as both a doctor and a missionary. He came to Africa to spread Christianity and to explore unmapped regions. But their side note to this one was he was fiercely against slave trade and believed that commerce and Christianity could change the entire continent. So he spent years trekking through the interior, often alone, and in the late 1860s, he vanished from public view while searching for the source of the Nile. And for years, nobody knew if he was dead or alive, until the journalist Henry Morton Stanley found him in 1871 in Ujiji, which is a small town on the eastern shore of Lake Tanganyika. Now, I have no idea if I'm saying these names right, but that's what they say I'm really cool when you're listening to the natives talk. So this lake, Tanganyika, is no ordinary lake. It's one of the largest and deepest in the world, stretching nearly 420 miles through 4 different countries: Tanzania, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Burundi, and Zambia. Its waters are so deep they hold almost 1/6 of all the fresh water on the Earth's surface. Now imagine a blue-green ribbon of water that seems to go on forever, surrounded by rolling hills and fishing villages. And that's where Stanley walked up to Livingstone and said those famous words. Dr. Livingstone, I presume. But Livingstone's health never recovered. Even after being found, he refused to go home. So he died right there in Zambia and requested that his heart, which he so loved the country, remain behind. So they buried his heart in the soil in Zambia and carried his body back to Britain for burial in Westminster Abbey. Now, just across the river from Zambia is Zimbabwe, a land with its own deep history. And from the ruins of Great Zimbabwe, once the center of a thriving empire, to its colonial period as Southern Rhodesia, and eventually to the independence in 1980, it right now is a third world, maybe even a fourth world country. It is not doing well, and there's a lot of poverty. Tying these two countries together, literally, is the Victoria Falls Bridge, which was completed in 1905. It was part of Cecil Rhodes' dream of Cape, meaning Cape Town, to Cairo, in Cairo, Egypt. It was a railway that he dreamed. And even though he died before it was finished, the bridge was placed close enough to the falls that the trains that passed through or over on the bridge would pass through the mist. Today, it's not just a border crossing. It's a magnet for thrill seekers who bungee jump or zip line over the gorge. And we got to watch them as we crossed the bridge, which I'll come to in just a second. Now, on the top of the bridge, if you're standing there, there's a spray that comes in your face and the roar of the Mosi Oa Tunya, or the Victoria Falls, in your ears. You can just feel the history. Now, I'm going to take a pause here. And this is what Travel with Intent is all about. You see, we knew we were going there. Learning about the history, talking to the natives is what made it so rich. It wasn't just checking off or aimlessly wandering. We had an entire agenda set up for every day there. We also had some downtime built in. Now, some people will want more downtime than others, but the idea is that you go with intent. You go with a purpose. Okay, so back to the bridge. Imagine for a second Livingstone's awe when he first sees this magnificent 1 mile long waterfall. Now, there's an island called Livingstone Island, which is where he saw it from because the natives brought him there so he could look over the falls. We got to go there, and I'll continue that story in just a second. So while you're there, you can see how these cultures connect the economies and the people, much like they did a century ago. Now, for us, this bridge, this Queen Victoria Falls Bridge, holds a special place in our memories. Crossing from Zambia into Zimbabwe, well, it felt like we were going from a third world country to a fourth world country, if that's even possible. The atmosphere changed immediately. If you're the sort of traveler who loves to haggle for souvenirs, man, you're in for a real treat on that bridge. The vendors there take bartering to a literal art form. You'll find hand-carved animals, baskets, jewelry, dollar notes left over from the days of hyperinflation. It's just all part of the experience. Passing through the border takes a little bit of time, either direction, because you have to go in, get stamped, get checked, passports, etc. And as we came through from Zambia to Zimbabwe, our guide, whose name was Clive, handed us off to his Zimbabwean counterpart, Tanaka. And it was like a little Olympic relay, right? They just kind of handed us off to go into the next part of our experience. So Tanaka then took us on a tour of Victoria Falls. It was about a mile to a mile and a half walk going to different viewpoints. Now, we had to don rain vests, rain coats, if you will, because we got so wet from the mist coming from the falls. We capped off the little tour that day with a helicopter flight over the falls. And let me tell you, if you've never been there before, seeing it from above is something you will never forget. From the air, you can truly appreciate the scale a mild, wide curtain of water dropping into a chasm so deep it swallows the Zambezi whole. But here's something most visitors don't realize. The Victoria Falls we see today is not the first version of the falls. In fact, it's the 8th. Over millions of years, the Zambezi River has been slowly cutting its way upstream through layers of basalt rock. Every time the river undercuts the cliff face, the edge collapses and the falls jump backward, leaving behind a zigzag of abandoned gorges. If you look downstream from the current falls, you can actually trace these past positions, each one marking where the river once plunged over the edge. So think of it like nature's slow-motion demolition project, but it's spread over geological time. So the falls we marvel at today, or we marveled at last week, are just the latest chapter in an ancient story. And someday, far in the future, they'll carve out a 9th falls further upstream. But for now, this 8th version is spectacular enough to leave you speechless and soaked. So from the helicopter, the mist rose like this giant plume, and it drifted over the rainforest that thrives in its spray, although there's no real rainforest. However, there is a golf course, which was very tempting to divert some of our energy on our little excursion there to the golf course, but we did not. We stayed with the program. The Zambezi stretches out above the falls in a broad, calm sheet, and it's deceptive in its stillness from certain angles. But up close and anywhere near the falls, not only do you see the mist, but wow, the noise, the loud, constant thrum of the water falling up to 100 meters is mind-numbing after a time. While the history is fascinating, and this experience we had at the falls was phenomenal, the people we met were even better. At Waterbury Lodge, which is where we stayed, our guide Crispin could speak 6 languages fluently. And I don't mean just getting along. He'd switch midstream to talk to another person with another language. He grew up in one of the 4 local villages, which I'll cover in just a minute, and he seemed to know every person, every bird and tree in the area by name. Then there was Eve Mona Lisa. What a great name. That's her real name. She also works at the lodge. She also speaks 6 languages, but she's not stopping there. She's currently working on Italian and French because I guess 6 just isn't enough. And of course, there's Clive. He was our initial driver that took us into Zimbabwe. He's also the local high school basketball coach. Very fascinating gentleman, just as sweet as can be, although he's divorced, he's got 3 kids. His love for life and his way he treated us was just over the top. And although Clive was one of our favorite people, he does have a little bit of a mark against him because of what we call the bridge incident. It happened right after Tanaka, our Zimbabwe guide, handed us over to Clive for the return to Zambia. Now, the Victoria Falls Bridge is a one-way road, so timing's everything, and they typically will take turns going back and forth. We were just about to enter the one-way zone from our van when we noticed there was a traffic jam going on. Seems this large truck pulling a trailer met a taxi who was coming across into Zimbabwe. Now, keep in mind, we're in Africa, and this would even just happen anywhere probably, but instead of calmly backing up, both drivers stopped. Now, the truck, it was impossible for that truck driver to back up, or just about impossible. The taxi makes the most sense, but we're just looking on as third-party observers. That taxi driver was beside himself. He jumped out of the car. His arms were flailing like some sort of angry interpretive dance. He was furious, which doesn't necessarily mean he was right. He was certainly louder. And I'm sure if I understood even one of the 6 languages commonly spoken here, I'd have been blushing at the vocabulary because everyone could hear him screaming. Now, Clive takes a look at this standoff and says to us, turns around and says, "Hey, this is going to take a while. Do you guys want to cross the bridge on your own?" And we thought, oh, this is great. The problem was we had no idea what that meant. The moment we stepped out of the van, it was game on. I've never been called boss so many times in my life. And my poor wife, Sherry, she was instantly surrounded by merchants, each with armfuls of carved animals, baskets, bracelets, you name it. What should have been a 5-minute stroll looking at the bungee jumpers and the zip liners turned into a 20-minute gauntlet of bargaining, banter, and very creative sales pitches. These guys are pros. First, they'll charm you, asking about home, America, for us, Texas, our family. Then they slide into a help a poor vendor routine, complete with soulful eyes, right? And just when you think you've reached your final no, they dramatically lower the price while you're sitting in the van and they're leaning all the way in. 2 of them leaning in through one door, trying to get us to buy more of their trinkets. Now, that day, my niece was the champion negotiator. She started with a price of $20 for a set of carved African animals and some bracelets for her kids. By the time we got to the van, it was $4 and her hair tie. That's right, they wanted their hair tie. Somewhere in Zimbabwe, a vendor is explaining to his wife how he obtained a great deal on a rare American hair accessory. So our itinerary included 3 different boat rides on the Zambezi River, each with its own flavor of adventure. The first was an evening excursion, light snacks, drinks, and adult beverages for those so inclined. Now, the river was calm. The light was just beautiful, it was golden as it kind of shimmered off the water. And the banks were alive with movement. Now, we saw crocodiles sunning themselves, hippos bobbing like boulders, baboons in the trees, monkeys leaping from branch to branch, and birds in colors and formats I couldn't begin to name. As the sun began to drop, the hippos got a little testy. We know this because they start opening their mouths, and I mean really opening their mouths. If you've ever seen a hippo open their mouth, you know that they can open it to exceed 180 degrees, which is both impressive, but it's a little bit nightmare-inducing if you know it's because they're angry or frustrated with you. At those moments, Crispin, who was our guide in the boat, would smoothly throttle up the engine and whisk us past the irritated giants before they decided we were going to be dinner. The next day, we ate lunch. We fed elephants, these massive, deliberately and surprisingly gentle beasts. And then after we got back from lunch, we headed down the river again towards the ended up going over rapids, which was an absolute riot. I was in the front row, and we got soaking wet again. That was quite an adrenaline rush because we weren't expecting that. And then our third boat ride, and this was the most interesting one, we went up to what's called Livingstone Island, where Dr. Livingstone saw the falls for the first time. And this is the place where my anxiety decided to test its upper limits. The trip required 2 outboard engines on the boat, but it wasn't for speed. It's to make sure under certain conditions that the boat didn't get pulled over the actual edge of the falls. Kind of reassuring as you get into the boat when they tell you that. Storming the little beach of Livingstone Island, we passed this sign that said, "The Loo with a View." So the Loo with a View. It was male and female facilities positioned with a full frontal panorama view of Devil's Pool and the falls. Only here can you quite literally answer nature's call while staring down one of nature's most dramatic drops. No pun intended. Now, Devil's Pool, which was our initial goal, is a natural infinity pool right at the edge of the falls. And it was the big daredevil experience that, my wife had set us up for. We'd researched it. We saw all the pictures. But on that given day, in this time of year, water levels are too high. The water's running much too fast, and the water levels need to go down a little bit more. So no worries. The guide said, we've got another treat in store for you. We call it Angel's Pool. They had discovered it 2 years earlier, and this group was the ones who discovered it. Now, let me just say, Angel's Pool is the wrong name. If Devil's Pool is scary, Angel's Pool is the devil's older brother. Picture lying on slick rocks with water pouring over you into a 350-foot drop while the guide holds your ankles. Except this time, they didn't hold our ankles. If heights make your stomach flip, this will send you into orbit. My wife is the family's official adrenaline junkie. She thought this was heavenly, fun, exciting, and not scary at all. I, however, reached the edge through sheer peer pressure. And while I may have been clinging to the rocks like a cat in a bathtub, I gotta admit, when it was over and we sat sipping tea and nibbling scones for our high tea experience, I really felt a surge of pride. I mean, we're sitting there sipping tea, eating some nice treats, looking over Angel Falls, seeing the mist coming up, hearing the thunder, and I realized I was hanging over the falls, looking 100 yards down. It felt pretty good to live through that experience. Don't know if I ever want to do it again, but certainly was something to brag about. Now, one of our trip's most significant highlights came off the river. We visited the local school. We purchased a bunch of school supplies, soccer balls, etc., in preparation for this experience. Bridget, the school principal, greeted us warmly and led us from class to class through the entire school. The school is funded largely by the lodge we stayed at, Waterbury, and its owners out of Great Britain. And it shows in the care and energy of the place. It was immaculate. It was amazing. One of the more enjoyable moments is we walked by the tumbling class, or the PE class, and there were at the time 2 boys in there kind of doing, some tumbling things, little flips. Once they saw us, another 4 or 5 joined them, and they instantly turned the volume up in their flips and their cartwheels. I mean, this was sheer testosterone in action. It doesn't matter where in the world you go. The smiles are the same. The kids are the same. They're great, and they're just wonderful to be around. Now, outside, as we left the main school campus, we walked a little bit further, and she took us to the school's garden, the most immense, vast garden I think I've ever seen. It supplies a large majority of the food for the students, and it's still so large that the local villagers, who we went and visited one of the villages, were invited to grow their own crops there. Right after we left the garden, we did go to one of the villages. Now, there are 4 of them, and we just went to one of them. Humbling, or being humbled, barely begins to cover this. Their homes are built from sticks, plastered with clay made from termite mounds. The villagers would walk 500 yards one ways to the Zambezi River every day and back for all of their water. It's for cooking, cleaning, drinking, and even mixing with the clay from the termite mounds, which they have to dig up and bring back to the village for building their homes. We kicked around a homemade soccer ball with some of the kids, and they were utterly fascinated by my nephew's Apple Watch. They had 3 kids at any given time hanging onto his wrist as he was talking to our guide as they were playing with his Apple Watch, pressing the screen like it might reveal something. We left feeling a little more grateful for what we have and a lot more connected to the people who had welcomed us in. Crispin, he was our guide, if you remember, knew nearly everyone we met. He called them by name. And when I asked, how do you know all these people? Because not everyone goes to the village and not everyone goes to the school. He explained that he grew up in a neighboring village, living exactly this way. It suddenly made sense why he was such a master at sharing the details of life here. He wasn't just telling us about it. He lived it. So from the roar of Mosi Oa Tunya, the smoke that thunders, to the quiet hum of a village garden, our journey through Zambia and Zimbabwe was a mix of history, adventure, culture, and connection. We crossed the iconic Victoria Falls Bridge, bartered with master negotiators, cruised the Zambezi alongside hippos, felt the spray from Angel's Pool, fed elephants, and kicked a soccer ball with schoolchildren whose joy was contagious. The people we met, the guides who spoke a half a dozen languages, locals who welcomed us into their lives, children eager to share a smile, made the biggest impression of all. That's why I say traveling with a purpose isn't just about where you go. It's about why you go and what you take from it. In Zambia and Zimbabwe, the history is alive, the cultures are vibrant, and the natural beauty is beyond anything a camera could capture. And when you weave all of that together with your own experiences, history, culture, you don't just take a trip. You take something much deeper home with you. Thanks so much for listening to How to Retire. If this resonates with you, please share it with a friend. And maybe ask yourself, how can I, in the future, travel with a purpose? Or, even better said, how can I live with a purpose? If you want to learn more about your retirement, please go to yourencoreyears.com and pick up my new book just coming out, Your Encore Years, The Psychology of Retirement, on Amazon or our website, Your Encore Years. All the best.